Hospitals are places of healing, but they also hold secrets that science can't always explain. These tales of hospital horrors will make you reconsider the silence of the hallways at night. Take the story you're about to hear, where a seasoned doctor discovers that the sweet little girl visiting patients at night harbors an absolutely macabre secret. If this kind of tale sends shivers down your spine, go ahead and like this and comment on what caught your attention most. Your voice here helps keep this space alive. And if you want to keep diving into these horror stories, subscribe to the channel. Now take a deep breath because the first story begins now. It was a cold night, the kind where the wind seems to whisper secrets through the cracks in the window. The hospital, tucked away in the middle of nowhere, seemed even more isolated from the world. Total silence, broken only by the monotonous beeping of the monitors and the sound of my own footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. I had been working there for years, but that night, there was something in the air. A strange energy, almost suffocating. My name is Raphael. I'm an internist. 15 years on the job. I've seen it all. People arriving in critical condition, emergency deliveries, nasty accidents, cruel diagnoses. I've always tried to stay calm, be rational, trust in medicine. But there are things no book teaches. There are experiences that defy any logic. Back then, the hospital was small but essential to the community. Only 5 doctors holding everything together, and at the helm, Dr. Beatrice. A tough woman, the kind who doesn't bow her head even to fate. She had a presence that filled any room. The kind of person you respect even if you don't want to. No one challenged Beatrice, and for good reason. She was the cold heart that kept that place pulsing, even when death seemed always nearby. Among the patients was Clara, a little girl with a smile so light it seemed to illuminate even the darkest ward of the hospital. Even sick, she was pure light. It was strange how such a fragile child could make the environment lighter. Everyone loved her. Doctors, nurses, patients. It was impossible not to get attached. I, in particular, developed a special fondness. She reminded me of my niece. Maybe that's why. One night I decided to do a round out of hours. The hospital was too quiet. That silence that seems more like a warning. When I entered one of the rooms, I saw Clara sitting beside the bed of Mr. George, an old man who had been hospitalized for days. She held his hand affectionately. As I approached, she looked at me and said, "I'm saying goodbye to him." That caught me off guard. I tried to smile, thought it was child's play. But, man, there was something in her voice. Something that chilled me to the bone. A softness, as if she wasn't really there. As if her voice came from somewhere else. I couldn't get it out of my head for the rest of the night. The next morning, Mr. George died. That's when the discomfort turned into unease. Clara had said goodbye to him. It couldn't be a coincidence. From that day on, I started paying attention to the details. And that's when the stories started to emerge. Other patients also talked about Clara, always the same pattern. She would appear, sit by their bedside, hold their hand, and say goodbye, never good night, never see you tomorrow, always goodbye. And guess what? Shortly after, those patients also died. The first time I heard this from another patient, my stomach turned. I thought of 1,000 explanations. Suggestion, delusion, some tasteless joke. But the reports started to repeat. Similar details, the same sweet look, the same phrase, the same sense of peace before the tragedy. That's when I started investigating. I looked for Clara's medical records, and the strangest thing, there was nothing, no records, no files, no exams. As if she had never been a patient there. I thought I was going crazy. I even considered that my mind was playing tricks on me. The heavy routine, the fatigue, the stress. Everything could have been affecting me more than I imagined. But that feeling of being watched, that chill that came out of nowhere, they weren't normal. With no way out, I went to talk to the only person who might know something, Dr. Beatrice. She looked at me in a way I'll never forget. Serious. It was as if, for the first time, she had taken off her armor. Her voice was low but firm. Clara died here, in an accident, years ago, before you arrived. That froze me. Inside, it felt like the ground had disappeared. She told me that the girl was in one of the elevators when there was an electrical failure. The elevator plummeted. She died instantly. No one talks much about it, but since then she appears, always in the same way before a patient's death. I couldn't sleep that night, or the following ones. And the worst, I never saw Clara again. Never. But the reports continued. Patients swore they had talked to her, always before the end, and I just listened. Tried to comfort, not knowing if I should say it was true or delusion. How to explain a spiritual presence inside a hospital. How to say that perhaps that child was a kind of messenger between this world and the other. I stayed at the hospital for 2 more years, did my job, saved lives, lost others. But deep down, I knew there was something there, something beyond medicine, something that not everyone can see, but that leaves a mark. And to this day, every now and then, when I enter an empty room, I have the feeling that Clara is nearby, waiting, watching, maybe just wanting to say goodbye. How scary. I want to know what you thought of the story. Tell me your opinion in the comments. As disturbing as it was to see a ghost child announcing deaths, there are even more frightening encounters with entities that seem to have dark intentions, like in the story you're about to see, where a nurse who should no longer exist roams the corridors of a hospital. It was supposed to be just another adventure. I was in the middle of a mountain race with the roar of the engine loud and the adrenaline making me feel alive. The wet road glistened under the headlights, and I felt invincible, you know? But everything turned upside down in a second. A tighter curve, the car slid, and that was it. I only had time to see the front of the car going straight towards the cliff. The impact was sharp. Darkness. Silence. I woke up in a strange place. A white light almost blinded me. Those continuous beeps in the background, like the sound of life being counted in numbers. I was in a hospital. More specifically, La Paz Hospital. I had heard of it. It's a bit isolated, and there have always been some weird stories going around. Spiritual presence, screams in empty hallways, things like that. After they stabilized me, they sent me to a room. During the day, everything seemed normal. But at night, the atmosphere changed. I woke up thirsty. The room was dark. Only a small light near the door made everything somewhat orange. When I turned, I saw a nurse standing there. She had exaggerated makeup, like for a party, and a smile. That didn't seem real. She was holding a glass of water. She offered it to me, and I accepted, even though I found it all a bit strange. She kept looking at me, firmly, as if she knew more about me than I did. There was something in her gaze, a bizarre depth. I thanked her for the water, but even after drinking, that bad feeling didn't go away. It seemed like there was a negative energy stuck to me, heavy. The next day, I asked the morning nurse about that woman. I mentioned her name, which she had told me herself, somewhat confused. The nurse stopped what she was doing, looked at me scared. "That name doesn't exist here anymore," she said. "We don't have anyone with that name on staff." Her voice was tense, and the atmosphere around became strange, like when the weather is about to change and the air gets heavy. I started to wonder if it had just been a dream, or if I had really seen something I shouldn't have. The next night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing noises that seemed to come from nowhere. And then, she came back. The same nurse. But this time her gaze was more intense. The makeup stronger. It looked like a mask, and she behaved as if she were playing with me. She approached the bed, leaned in, and started whispering words I couldn't understand. But it wasn't a normal whisper. It was as if the sound vibrated through the walls. It gave me a chill in my soul. The next day, I had that stuck in my throat. When I saw a staff member passing in the hallway, I decided to tell her. I talked about the nurse, her appearance, her name. The woman turned pale. "You saw Nurse Salazar?" she asked, seemingly in shock. I froze. I just nodded. She started telling me that this Salazar was an old nurse there, very dedicated, loved by the patients. But one day she took her own life inside the hospital. No one ever knew why. But since then, several people said they had seen a woman with the same characteristics wandering the halls, especially near young or vulnerable patients, and there was this sinister rumor that she appeared to take someone with her. Hearing this was like another shock. I remembered her face, the way she looked at me, that water. What did she want from me? The staff member looked at me seriously. She told me not to talk to her if she appeared again. Don't go with her. Don't follow her. Don't answer. Those words were etched in my mind. When night fell, the hospital seemed to breathe with me. You know when you feel like you're not alone, even when no one is around? The air got cold. I could swear there was someone standing at the door, watching me. Almost asleep, between awake and dreaming, I heard a voice. It was low, calling my name as if whispering in my ear. My body froze. I couldn't even move my head. When I finally opened my eyes, she was there, beside my bed. But it wasn't just the woman from before anymore. Her face was deformed, as if part of the makeup had melted, and with it, the emotions. The smile was a mix of sadness and hatred. The eyes, empty, like holes, staring at me in a way I will never forget. I screamed, a pure animal scream, a scream of someone who saw something they shouldn't have. Several staff members rushed into the room. They turned on the lights, and the figure vanished, evaporated as if she had never been there, but the weight in the air remained. My heart beat erratically as if trying to escape my chest. No one understood what had happened. I couldn't even speak. I just knew I was in danger, and that it wasn't over. The next morning I was discharged. They did the paperwork, gave me the papers. The nurse from the first night, of course, wasn't there. A new staff member, smiling, friendly, accompanied me to the exit. But not even she could calm the fear that still dominated me. As I walked through the hallways to leave, I felt like someone was behind me, as if the hospital wanted me to stay. But I left. The daylight hit my face, and for a few seconds, I breathed relieved. But the relief didn't last long. Inside me, something had changed. The whole experience seemed stuck to my skin. I was no longer just a guy who survived an accident. Now I was part of a story that few people will believe. A story that perhaps hasn't ended. Because La Paz Hospital is not just a place of treatment. It is a place where memories do not die. And some ghosts don't either. How bizarre. Escaping a presence that tries to drag you to the other side is already terrifying. But what if the dead don't want to rest and decide to talk to you inside a morgue? That's exactly what happens in the next story. That night, the hospital was quieter than usual. I was new there, having just started as a technical assistant in the most avoided wing by everyone. The morgue. You know, the kind of place that seems to suck the energy right out of you? Yeah, that was it. I tried not to think too much about it, but as I walked down the empty corridor, it felt like the air itself was getting heavier. I swear, it felt like the whole hospital was watching me. When the clock struck midnight, I entered the cold room. The light inside was that flickering fluorescent kind, buzzing and casting shadows on the walls, a scene that, honestly, would make anyone uncomfortable. Every step I took echoed too loudly, and the more I listened, the more I felt like I wasn't alone. It wasn't long before the phone rang. I was told to retrieve a body that had just arrived. The guy had been in a horrible accident. They said he was practically unrecognizable. As I listened to the description, my stomach turned, but I took a deep breath. It was part of the job, right? Death was routine there. At least that's what I kept telling myself. I went to the isolation wing where they had left the body. When I got there, I froze. It was a brutal scene. Even lying there, lifeless, the body seemed to convey a kind of anguish. That total absence of life had something that messed with your mind. And when I put my hands on him to transfer him to the gurney, it felt like the air around me had gotten denser, heavier. I got that classic feeling of a spiritual presence, you know? That energy you can't explain, only feel. I wanted to run out of there, but I couldn't. As I adjusted the body on the gurney, I looked at the guy's face. His eyes were half open, empty, cold. But there was a moment when I swear I saw him blink. A dry, quick blink. That froze me. My brain tried to find a logical explanation, but the rest of my body was screaming that something was very wrong. I tried to get back to work, focusing on what needed to be done. But then the noises started. First, a soft sound, like someone walking in socks down the hall. Then whispers. It seemed like they were coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I turned from side to side, trying to understand. No one. Just the silence and that increasingly suffocating feeling that something was about to happen. I went back to the room, a little dizzy, sweating cold. And that's when I noticed the door to the compartment where I had left the body was ajar. I was sure I had closed it, absolutely. My heart raced, my skin crawled. I approached slowly, and when I looked inside, I almost fell backward. The dead man's face. He had a smile. But not just any smile. It was crooked, mocking as if he was enjoying my terror. I stood there, paralyzed. I didn't know if I should cry, scream, or run. And then, the impossible happened. The body moved. First a finger, then the arm. Before I knew it, the guy was sitting up, covered in blood, his eyes fixed on me. He wasn't dead, he wasn't alive. He was something else, something that shouldn't have been there. And then he spoke, with a scratchy, dry voice. The best part about being dead is that I don't feel anything anymore. That shattered me inside. It was like the floor had disappeared. I turned around, tried to run, but my legs seemed locked. I took a deep breath and forced one step, then another, until I managed to get out of the room. When I crossed the corridor, I heard familiar voices. The nurses laughing, talking as if everything was normal. They had no idea what I had just been through. No one noticed anything. I stood there, my chest about to explode, trying to understand if all of that had really happened, or if I was losing my mind. The next morning, I was still in shock. I kept reliving everything, like I was stuck in a loop. The image of the smile, the phrase, the eyes, none of it would leave my mind. But then came the detail that made everything worse. During a meeting, we found out that the man from the accident had actually been poisoned before the car crashed. A murder. And then everything made sense in a weird way, as if he had come back to say something, to warn. I don't know. I never saw that spirit again. But every time I pass by the morgue door, my whole body tenses. The memory of his gaze, of what he became that night, still lives with me. And the worst part is that no matter how hard I try, I can't forget the feeling that lingered in the air after he was gone. As if, in some way, he was still there, watching. How horrible. Sometimes the supernatural manifests itself explicitly, but true terror can also be in the mind of someone next to you. The story that follows takes place in a psychiatric hospital, where the danger is not a ghost, but an increasingly unpredictable roommate. But before we continue with the story, if you've made it this far, it means you're enjoying our stories, so go ahead and leave a like to let YouTube know you like this kind of content, and don't miss any more horror stories. From the start, I knew that hospitalization wasn't going to be easy. The sky was heavy, all gray, and the weather matched how I felt inside. I had been admitted to a psychiatric ward after months of sinking into a bottomless pit. Depression had become my place in the world. There was no more pleasure, color, or meaning, just pain, weight, and silence. When they put me in that cold room, with those white walls that seemed to squeeze rather than embrace, I sat on the bed and felt a knot in my stomach. It was like I had been thrown into limbo. The nurses passed by me with the same exhausted expression, or like they had seen too much. Their faces didn't react, and that, somehow, made everything even more desolate. On the second day, they introduced me to my roommate. His name was Richard. At first, he seemed nice. He had an easy smile, a bit forced but still welcoming. But as he started talking, the conversation took a turn for the strange. He talked as if there were people, or things, lurking around. He used words like demons, said the hospital was full of bad presences, that the staff was haunted by something no one wanted to admit, and the way he talked. It wasn't just the content, it was the gleam in his eyes, as if he was seeing these things all the time. That gave me chills. There was something about Richard that didn't add up. It was like at any moment he could turn into someone else. Over time, things only got worse. He started talking non-stop about a patient named Carla. He said she was an angel, sent to guide him. He talked about her as if she were sacred. I didn't know who Carla was, but I felt uneasy every time he opened his mouth to talk about her. It was like that obsession was growing, until it became something dangerous. You know when you feel like something bad is about to happen? That heavy energy that makes you look around all the time? I started to pay attention. I wanted to protect that woman, even without knowing her. I was afraid of what Richard might do. I spent the nights awake trying to listen to the footsteps in the hallway, the noises from the next room. Every silence was deafening. One night, the tension became unbearable. It was raining hard outside, and I tried to use the sound of the water hitting the window to forget where I was. Then, out of nowhere, Richard looked at me with a strange look. It wasn't anger, nor sadness. It was like he was calculating, studying me. That froze me. The next day I barely spoke to him, but the situation exploded a few nights later. I had gone to the bathroom trying to calm down. The sound of the faucet gave me some relief. That's when I heard the screams. Richard, screaming through the halls like a madman. He yelled that he was Satan himself, that I was trying to steal his angel, Carla. Panic took over me. I froze. I felt my heart almost jump out of my chest. I hid there in the bathroom, trying not to make a sound. Every step he took in the hallway seemed closer. Every scream seemed more insane. I managed to call a nurse. My voice barely came out. When she came in and saw me like that, she called for help right away. They moved me to another room, but the change didn't bring relief. Even far from him, I still heard the screams. He called me, every night, as if he knew exactly where I was, and that messed with my head. It wasn't just fear. It was like he had left a part of himself inside me, a spiritual presence that wouldn't go away. Later, the rumors started. Other patients whispered about Richard's past. They talked about violent episodes, old outbursts. They said he had hurt people before. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I already knew. That negative energy he carried wasn't new. It had been there for a long time. When the hospital found out he had hidden a piece of metal, a kind of improvised blade, the decision came. Richard was transferred to a maximum security ward. On the day they took him away, I saw everything. He walked down the hallway escorted by 2 security guards. When he saw me, his look changed. It was pure hatred. He screamed with all his might, "You can't escape me, Andrew. I will always be here." That haunted me. It echoed in my head for days. At night, I still woke up sweating with the impression that he was in the corner of the room. His shadow seemed to live in the dark, and the feeling of being watched never went away. But over time, and with a lot of effort, I started to come back to myself. I dove into therapies. I dug up memories, faced pains I didn't even remember existed. It was a slow, painful process. But little by little, I started to breathe again. The nights became less heavy. I managed to sleep, dream. Sometimes I still had nightmares about Richard, but I knew they were just dreams, just echoes. On the day of my discharge, when I walked through those gates, it was like leaving an invisible captivity. I was free, but also carrying scars that no one could see. The experience in there had transformed me, shaped me. Today, I go on. Each step is a choice to continue. Sometimes I look at the cloudy sky and remember those days, but I also remember that even in the shadows, there is still a chance for a new beginning. And that's why I tell this story. Not just to exorcise the ghosts, but to remember that the worst isn't seeing the monsters. It's when they look back. What a horror. What did you think of the story? What rating from 0 to 10 would you give it? Tell me your opinion in the comments. Working the night shift at a hospital is an experience that messes with your head. The city sleeps outside, but inside, it feels like time moves differently. That night, the cold was biting, and the hallways were so silent that my footsteps echoed as if I were walking inside an empty tunnel. I was in charge of the shift, and everything seemed normal until the phone rang. They asked me to go to the last room at the end of the hallway. They said there was a new patient there, but their tone was strange, as if they weren't quite sure what was going on. I went. Upon arriving, I saw an elderly woman lying on the stretcher, very thin, with almost translucent skin, and a fixed gaze into the darkness as if she were seeing something I couldn't. She had no identification, no belongings, not even a name on her chart. And what unsettled me the most, she didn't say a word, not even a blink. I tried to start a conversation. I asked if she was in pain, if she needed anything. Nothing. No reaction. Just that vacant stare as if she were somewhere else. I approached to check her vital signs, and that's when she whispered something that sent chills down my spine. There are things hidden in the walls. They're always watching. Her voice was so low it was almost inaudible, but what she said stuck in my mind. This wasn't the rambling of someone delirious. It was as if she was certain of what she was saying. I froze. I stood there not knowing whether to leave or ask more. At that moment, the hallway lights started to flicker, and it wasn't just a faulty bulb. It felt like some presence was passing by. The air turned unnaturally cold, the kind that cuts through you. I felt a shiver run up my spine, and though my instincts screamed at me to get out, something held me in that room. I stayed there for a few minutes until I decided to step out for some air. I thought maybe I was just tired, imagining things. I took a deep breath in the hallway, tried to pull myself together. But when I returned to the room, I found something even worse. The door was locked, from the inside. I called security. We knocked, called out. Total silence. When they finally broke down the door, the room was empty. There was no sign of the woman anywhere. No stretcher, no sheets out of place, as if she had never been there. I asked them to check the security cameras. I reviewed the footage with the technicians. Nothing. No movement. No one entering or leaving that room since I had stepped out for air. It was as if the room had been sealed in time. That icy feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. I started digging through old records. I wanted to understand who that woman was, why she had said that to me. I spent nights reviewing files until I found a name. Clara. Mrs. Clara. She had been admitted there decades ago. The medical record was incomplete, but there was a note that sent shivers down my spine. Death recorded under mysterious circumstances. There were many rumors about her. Old staff members said Mrs. Clara saw things. She talked about the shadows in the walls. She said they moved, that they watched. They said that sometimes, late at night, her face would appear in the hallway mirrors. Those lifeless eyes, staring at whoever passed by. I started paying attention. In the following days, I began to hear the same stories I had read in the records. Whispered comments among nurses, security guards, cleaning staff. They all said they had felt something strange in that same room. A sense of spiritual presence, of being watched. Some even said they had heard low voices, whispers coming from the walls. I avoided that hallway for a while, but it was as if something pulled me back there. Every time I passed by, I felt a weight on my chest as if someone was calling me. I couldn't explain it. It was a silent call, almost magnetic. Until one day, I couldn't take it anymore. I went back. I entered the room, determined to understand everything once and for all. Inside, the air seemed still. Not even the sound of the air conditioning could be heard. And then I saw it. An old mirror leaning against the back wall. I looked at my reflection, and it wasn't just me there. Behind my image, a shadow, a figure standing in the distance. I stood still. As I got closer, the image became clearer. It was her, Mrs. Clara. The same face, the same fixed eyes. And then, in the reflection, her mouth moved, without sound. But I understood perfectly. They are always here. I felt my body freeze. I couldn't move for a few seconds. I could only stare. Those eyes pierced through me. There was no hatred in them. There was a kind of sadness and a warning. I left that room as if I were carrying a ton on my back. Since then, I've never gone back, but I've never been the same. The feeling of being watched has stayed with me to this day. And sometimes, when I pass by a mirror in the hospital, I avoid looking directly, because I know that if I stare for too long, I might see her again. And if she's there, it's because they are still nearby, hidden in the walls, watching. Always. If you've made it this far, it means you've got the guts to walk down dark hallways, even knowing you might not be alone. If these stories pulled you in, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Here, horror comes in just the right dose for those who love that chill running down their spine. And drop a comment saying, "I stayed till the end." That's how I know who stuck with me through the very last shadow. Hit the like button too, not just for me, but for the connection we build with every story told in the dark. There's another video right here that'll take you even deeper into this dark universe. Click it and come along with me.